I'm very much now looking forward to welcoming Dr. Paolo Frankl, who is responsible for renewable energy at the International Energy Agency, which was created almost 50 years ago now as an OECD organization. I think at that time the motivation was to rather look after the oil supply, but I think IEA has changed a lot and is now focusing very much on climate change related issues, how to make renewables a large part of the energy supply. And Paolo, you have recently published a report, a long report next to your regular World Energy Outlook. You've published a report which is a roadmap for the global energy sector net zero by 2050, which means how to make the energy supply of the world compatible with the Paris goals. Paolo, we're very pleased to have you with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Stefan. Thank you for inviting the IEA and myself to this important event on renewables working together. I would say even beyond renewables. And as Rana mentioned, the synergy for energy efficiency is an obvious and the first one. Thanks to Peter for mentioning Bonn 2004. It's actually the very, very first big publication of the IEA on renewables. Many may have forgotten that. I was not part of the organization at that time, but I had the honor to contribute to that document as an external consultant. Now, let me try to share my slides. Okay, very quickly. We are really in unprecedented times. Now, on one hand, there is the COVID crisis with an unprecedented impact on the global energy system, the biggest impact since World War II. On the other hand, there is unprecedented policy momentum looking at the country pledges. More than 120 countries are pledging for net zero emissions. We have intermediate targets that, as Rana mentioned, are almost more important than the long-term 2050 targets. We have the largest stimulus packages in economic history, although without doubt, a lot of this money for the moment is rather going to fossil fuels rather than renewables. And we are heading towards a crucial COP26 meeting in Glasgow. Now, with this background, the IEA published on the 18th of May the net zero emission roadmap, and I will be happy to look at the role of renewables there. But before that, let me show just a few short-term forecast of what is going on right now. Because on the 18th of May, we published the roadmap, but on 1 week before, we published our market forecast update. Now, what we see coming in 2022, on average, with this, I'm just showing that in the next 3 years, renewables power capacities make a big jump. It's on average is 270 for the 3 years. That's a good thing. Whether this is enough or not to be on track on the net zero emission, that's a different story, and I will come to that in a minute. But what is true, and I think we should keep it in our heads, that 90% and actually over 90% of the global power capacity increase comes from renewables. Next, please. So when you look at the dynamics in terms of countries, we see something which goes always around China. China had exceptional high additions in 2020 and then slows down in 2021 and 2022. And this is something which Rana maybe did not mention too much and which is still a very important point, which is policy uncertainty. That the policies come and go, create boom and bust cycles. Overall, they may be compensated by markets developing faster in another region. So for instance, what you see in this graph is very clearly in 2021 and 2022, China goes down and Europe becomes again the second largest market in the world. And also other countries like India and like United States have a fast deployment. But this policy unpredictability remains a major issue. Next, please. Now, in terms of technologies, we have very different stories. Solar PV is a continuous record-breaking, going up every year, and we see this trend continuing actually beyond 2022. Wind is different. It's an exceptional 2020 year, and then a slowdown, and then possibly going up again. I will come back on 1 second on this. Hydro depends on the installations of very large installations, but on hydro, I would like to mention one crucial point, that not only hydro provides low carbon electricity, but it is a natural enabler of faster PV and wind, which are variable. I totally agree with John's remark, renewables are not intermittent, they are variable. And you need to have also dispatchable supply to compensate for the fluctuations of these variable renewables, and hydro is the best provider among renewables for this. I also wish to just announce that in 2 days from now, on Wednesday, we will publish a special hydropower market report with an event which will be live streamed in 2 p.m. in Paris. Next, please. 1 second on this. This is the boost and boom and bust cycles for industry that are really detrimental in order to have a sustainable growth. It's not new, it's always related to China, but this is really not very sustainable for the industry to make a predictable goal. And we have to have this in mind when we think about sustainable policies going ahead. And let's go quickly to the net zero emission outlooks. Next, please. So this figure looks at the whole entire system. I can only reinforce what Rana has said. We should not just look at the electricity. The renewables community, I would say, is sometimes a little bit self-complacent in looking just at the progress in renewable electricity and forgetting that in terms of total final consumption, the whole electricity is only 1/5. The big thing is energy. And my first message here of this roadmap of the IEA is energy efficiency first. Our roadmap is a roadmap of economic growth. The GDP more than doubles in 2050, but the whole energy consumption actually goes down by 10%. And obviously this implies very, very strong assumptions on energy efficiency. The supply of this energy becomes dominated by renewables, 2/3, 70%. I'm speaking about the whole energy, not just the electricity, in various forms, and the rest is for nuclear or abated fossil fuels. Next one. Now, the roadmap has two big pillars. One is, in this decade, the massive, fastest possible deployment of all clean technologies that we know. And to give you just a benchmark for solar and wind, this means more than 1,000 gigawatt per year in 2030. So this is 4 times the record year of 2020. Feasible? Probably, but a challenge. Electric cars, it means which had another record in 2020, which is very good, but we have to multiply this by almost a factor 20 to make sure that we have almost 60 millions of electric car sales. And of course, with electric cars goes the charging infrastructure and distribution grids, making sure that the distribution networks are strong enough. The third is energy efficiency, as I said, very ambitious. The energy intensity need to go to 4% per year. And actually, that one, if you ask me which one of the 3 is more challenging, the most challenging to me is the one on energy efficiency, because it implies also the behavioral change of so many millions of people. And it requires very predictable, very strong policy incentives and stability. Next, please. The second is, and thank you, Rana, for showing this graph before me, to put the milestones over time to get to the long-term net zero targets. we have looked at more than 400 technology milestones. I will only mention four important one for renewables. In 2030, as I said, more than 1 terawatt of global installations just for solar and wind, but also already 150 megaton from low carbon hydrogen with 850 gigawatt of electrolyzers. Now, this 850 gigawatt is a 2,500 times increase compared to 2019. I repeat, 2,500. In 2040, looking at fuels, 50% of fuels used in aviation are sustainable. And basically, this comes either from advanced biofuels or from hydrogen and synthetic fuels, also low carbon. In 2050, almost 70% of the global generation of electricity is coming from solar and PV and wind. And we have in 2045, 3,000 of gigawatt of electrolyzers. This is basically 10,000 times more than today. This is the scale of the challenge. Of course, the power sector decarbonizes first, and then come the harder to abate sectors, industry and transport and buildings. But this is just even a larger scope of working together, where renewables not just have to work together with renewables themselves, but also with energy efficiency and other technologies, and to have including an ordered transition of phase out of fossil fuels. Next, please. I go back to electricity because I think this slide is how can I say, has a visual impact. The second point, the second pillar after the energy efficiency is electrification. And really a big thing happening here with more than 70,000 terawatt hours of electricity generation and demand by 2050. A big majority of this, 70%, is solar and PV and wind, which calls for massive flexibility for system integration, much better grids, affordable storage, dispatchable supply from other renewables or low carbon fuel sources, and of course demand side demand. And I can only repeat this so many times. This is not just about supply, it is also about demand. One last remark. In this graph, hidden, there are more than 12,000 terawatt hours that are utilized to produce merchant hydrogen. And this gives you also a sense how renewables indirectly contribute to the clean energy transition. My last slide with some concluding points. Next, please. So 4 main points. First, while it is true that some renewables are becoming cheaper and cheaper, more competitive, this is mainly a solar and PV wind story. And while they are transforming power systems worldwide, this is by far not enough. First point, we need to focus on system integration. That has to be secure and cost effective. This means attract investments in grids. Infrastructure need time to be built. So in long-term planning, an investment decision needs to be taken right away. Third point, we need to look at the whole energy systems, at heating and cooling, at transport. And this means, and all the end-use sector that are harder to abate. So this means working together, but also looking at innovation for hydrogen, other low-carbon fuels, and battery storage, and also combining with carbon capture, use, and storage where this makes sense, and it does make sense in many cases. And my last point, even if renewables are getting better and better, don't be mistaken. The role of governments is more important than ever to have predictable trends, predictable policies to achieve the targets. The targets are fantastic, but they are not enough. Governments' policies need to address non-economic barriers, attract affordable financing, which is not necessarily where it should be in developing and emerging economies, and accelerate system integration and innovation all across the energy system. I'll stop it here. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Paolo. That was a very good overview of how you see the future. And just at this point of time, just a very brief comment. that in the past you've sometimes been too conservative in the prediction of renewables. I'm sure this time you agree that let's hope that this is again a little bit the case and we will manage to maybe at least what you predict, but maybe even we can do more.
You're right, of course, that our outlook have changed over time, but they really reflect the changes in the policies of the countries. And today's the pledges are a completely different story from just 12 2 months ago.